Hello and welcome to Movement Parallels Life. Today we're looking at simple outdoor training. I find that it's often these simple practices that are the most effective. Starting off today, just showing you one of my favorite simple practices, rock hopping. So we're just working on locomotion, moving our body through space, and in this case, over more complex terrain than just flat, uniform ground. The key here is balance. You've also got a lot of opportunities for precision stepping and jumping. And one of my favorite parts about this practice is the built-in mindfulness. You can't zone out, you can't become distracted, because if you do, you're gonna stumble, you're gonna fall. And this is a very simple practice that's so easy to get lost in. I might play around here for just 5 or 10 minutes as a warm up before I move on. Sometimes this is my whole session and I'll be out on these rocks for an hour or more. There's just so many different jumps and steps and balances to play around with. Just walking over the rocks takes your ankles, knees, and hips at all different kinds of angles. So there's a lot of movement goodness here. My biggest piece of advice is to start slowly. Don't assume stability. Don't take any step for granted, but get to know the environment first, see what the stability of the rocks is like, and then begin to build your speed and fluidity from there. In keeping with our theme of simplicity, we're going out to a wide open grass field and just working on sprinting and carrying next. I mean, these are two essential human movements, very practical, so it just makes sense that we train them. If you can find a well-maintained field, check it out for any debris or dangers, but I would really encourage you to kick your shoes off and experience what it's like to run barefoot. Feel how your feet and your lower legs need to work harder to stabilize and to make the adjustments of the terrain. It's really much more of a complete experience to run barefoot. And it's likely you can hunt around a bit and find a rock, so you don't have to lug your weights out to the park, but you've got some equipment right there. So just mixing in sprinting drills with heavy carries is simple, practical, and a great way to train. So here I'm going through a shoulder carry. It's always a little bit of a puzzle to figure out how you're going to arrange the rock, how you're going to position it on your shoulder or in your arms, and how are you going to deal with the awkwardness of that object. It's asymmetrical. It's not balanced at all. It's got some rough edges. So again, you've got this mindfulness piece where you can't just heave it up and go. You've got to put some thought behind it. And so in our running practice, we are going to prioritize moving in all planes, not just moving straight ahead, but you want to be able to move sideways and to be able to rotate and change orientation. And that's just what we're practicing right here, a side shuffle. And about halfway through, I rotate and change my orientation. And this just starts to develop more adaptive capability, more adaptive running skill that is going to help us in real world terms. Here you can focus on keeping a slightly lowered center of gravity, staying on the balls of the feet, and fluidly linking the strides together. After a few passes there, going on to a chest carry. So I hoist the rock up to chest height. I secure my grip and I'm hugging the weight into my chest, and that's where the support's coming from, but that's going to challenge my breathing tremendously. So I do my best to maintain my belly breathing pattern that we work on before and after every practice. I love the challenge here. The breathing gets restricted, and especially when the weight's heavy, the fatigue sets in and your body starts to panic a little bit. You freak out, and again, your breath becomes the vehicle to calm yourself down and keep moving with skill and efficiency. Give my body just a few seconds to recover, but then I go back into the next sprinting drill. Now I'm working a full orientation change, 360-degree switch. This is a really athletic movement that can look very simple when it's executed, but if you break it down, there's a lot going on here. You've got to maintain the forward lean of your body to take advantage of gravity and maintain your momentum. You've got to know how to rotate through your hips, and you've got to know how to keep your feet positioned underneath your center of gravity so that you maintain your balance. So a lot going on here, but this is very practical, especially if you're thinking about a real world situation where you've got to monitor what's going on around you. That might be in sports, that might be in a game, that might be in an emergency. It's really important to have that adaptable capability. Your performance isn't solely predicated on how far and how fast, but your ability to be responsive and adapt in real time to changing circumstances is huge for running. Next up, we've got an overhead carry, and this is really challenging. It requires a great deal of strength and stability, but also shoulder mobility. You want to make sure here that your bottom ribs aren't flaring open and then you're not arching into your lower back. It's not worth sacrificing the stability and the alignment of your body just to perform this technique. So if your mobility is not there, you want to find a lighter object or maybe use one arm, and that's going to be a little bit easier in terms of mobility demands. As you're walking, you want to feel the muscles of your core engaging and squeezing strong. And you should have this sense that those muscles are giving your body and your spine the necessary support. The pelvis is level and you're very mindful of the steps that you're taking. You're not just falling into each step, but every step is performed with control and precision. You want to maintain this control all the way through start to finish with this carry. When you're done, set your feet and carefully lower the weight back down to your chest and to the ground. Our next running pattern is going to integrate a vertical jump, just a short sprint, planting both feet and exploding upward, tucking the knees through the jump, and then landing back on both feet. Want this landing to be soft, but you're going to quickly transition back into forward locomotion. There's going to be a small rebound that takes place when you land the jump. You can take advantage of this rebound to continue moving efficiently and not lose any of your fluidity in this pattern. So you'll sprint a few steps, jump, and as you hit the ground, your momentum keeps you going forward. You can utilize the rebound to continue on into a run, a crawl, or a roll. Performing this pattern well requires a lot of explosiveness and a lot of stability, so you're going to find that it really takes a metabolic toll. You're going to be huffing and puffing. Give yourself rest. And as we go into this next pattern, we're going to try a different version of the jump. This is more of a split jump where you'll see a 1 foot takeoff, same 2 foot landing. This jump is going to be well suited for clearing distance. The previous jump is going to be better if you need some height. So that's a little bit on the practical application there, but both are really good patterns to practice, again, to include this element of explosiveness, of stabilization, and really just being more adaptive, having more fun with your running practice. All right, so I'm a little gassed after those jumps. So going with an easier carrying variation, the waist carry. Do a deadlift, use my thighs to lap the weight, and find a good strong grip so I can hold the weight to my hips and perform this waist carry. This variation works really well for sandbags, for bags of dirt, softer objects, with rocks, it's kind of a toss-up, so you just have to see if you can find the right grip and make sure the object isn't too big that it interferes with your ability to walk in a smooth fashion. But with the right size object, this technique is very efficient. You keep your arms straight, you keep holding the weight close to your body. Make sure that you're not tense in the shoulders or the neck, and you can really use this technique and carry an object for a great distance without getting tired. Now the reps are starting to add up just a little bit, and I take my time, get back to my breathing, and just try to hang in there for a few more rounds. Gonna go on to the next running pattern. Gonna go back to that lateral shuffle with the reversal. Now, at this point in the session, there's some fatigue building up. I've been running around for a while, so I'm really going to stay focused on the quality of my movement. I'm going to really stay focused on my breathing and all the little details that make up efficiency. It would be really easy to just grind my way through this and really easy to start to get sloppy with some of this technique, but that's not satisfactory. That's not why I'm out here. It's making sure that I'm aware of how my feet are hitting the ground, how my body's positioned, how I'm breathing. All those things make the difference and help me grow better from this training. I jump right in on the next pattern. It's going to be a crawl transitioning up into a sprint. The key here is to maintain your spinal stability. You don't want your upper back to start to round as you're transitioning from the ground up to sprinting, but you want to make sure that those shoulders are set, your chest is up, and you're getting your feet underneath your center of gravity as you make that transition. It's nice to slow down with the crawl, get back to your breathing, and be very deliberate with how you're going to make that transition into your next sprint. I'll be taking my last few runs now. I'm going to play with a full turn. Start with a back pedal, turn over one shoulder, turn back, turn over to the other shoulder. Just try to stay loose in between the drills. Make sure I'm connected to my breathing. And just starting to break out. Continue to rotate through the hips and just have fun with some of these movements. Make them playful, make them adaptive. And once you've got a baseline established, then grab a friend and start to play together. And I guarantee that that's going to bring in an element of spontaneity that's going to drive you to integrate these movements better and just experience more growth in addition to just having a lot more fun with this stuff. I'm going to finish up today with one more carry. I'm going to go overhead on the way down, chest on the way back. Again, this is really going to challenge me to stay focused, stay dialed in all the way to the very end. No checking out early, no sloppy movements. Got to finish it out strong. And at this point, we really have an opportunity to practice with discipline. It can be so easy at this point to cut corners, to give up early, to rush, to get sloppy. But instead, you stay focused and you see your work through all the way to the end. That's what I call being a finisher. And this is a good habit to start to instill. This is one of those areas where movement parallels life, where what we cultivate in our training overflows, carries over into how we show up in the rest of our lives, in our decision making, in our approach to work. This is cultivating ourselves, growing ourselves, developing to become our best self. I finish things up with a cool down, especially when I do something very dynamic like running, especially when I do something that requires a high amount of tension like carrying stones. It becomes very important to take some time with a cool down to strip away some of that tension and introduce stretch back into the muscles that have been expanding and contracting so rapidly. Stretching out my hips is a top priority, especially after I run. If I skip this and I just go sit down and get cold, I find that I tend to get very stiff, very tense, and my recovery goes way down. And it's not exactly positive reinforcement to run again. So making sure that I spend some time with my hip stretches is, really worth the time, worth the effort. And these lateral shifts are one of my go-to movements. I continue to keep this element of strength in my stretching, and I use my breathing to gradually expand the range of motion. So it's never about forcing the body, but I'm using my strength and I'm creating productive stretches. Hanging out in a deep squat position is another way that I like to spend my cool down. Alleviates some tension in my lower back, allows me to just melt into deep hip flexion and maybe open up the calves and ankles. I love my long sit stretch as well. So just hinging forward at the hips and stretching out the legs individually or reaching down to the middle. This really nice way to stretch out the adductors. And I'll just spend several minutes here, deep breathing, just letting the position open up. The side bent sit stretch is another go-to favorite of mine. Just a nice way to let the glutes open up and stretch after working so hard in the sprints. And if you've been following along with previous workouts, you're going to recognize some of these seated positions. And instead of adding a lot of movement and dynamic transitions, in this case, I'm just holding the positions out longer and using my breath to breathe and release some of the muscular tension. Same movements, same positions, but a different application, a different intention behind them. So really the takeaway message today is that simple training is good training. Simple training is effective training. And you don't need a fully decked out gym. You don't need some super epic outdoor venue. But there's so much that can be accomplished with just an open field or, just whatever environments that are easy to access, whatever's just around you. How can you start to see the angles and get creative? So I hope this inspires you. I hope this gives you some ideas to go out and play. As always, it's a pleasure to share. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.